Hello and welcome again to another episode of Risk and Revolution. I'm Amira, and together with my dear friend Mike Gulla, we
Hey,
are
everybody.
going to talk about risk and how it's revolute all the industry that we are involved in. And today we have a special guest. I am so glad that we can have him again. The first one was in Policy in Wonderland, but again, right now we are going to speak about different risk and much more interesting. Amir Kabir is the founder and managing partner at Overlook and also the owner of the newsletter, The Weekly Dose of Risk, right?
That's correct.
That's correct. And so you need to hit subscribe not only for this podcast, also for his newsletter. Each Wednesday, I think, you will get it directly to your email and you will get like three topics. I think this is the kind of the structure that you have, right?
That's
So,
correct. Yeah, it's like three tier basically.
so you can enjoy another great newsletter. But without further ado, let's jump in.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to do this with you both. Never know you guys for a long time now, and yeah, excited to talk more about all things risk and tech.
Oh, that's awesome, Amir. It's good to see you, brother, and glad to be here with you as well. Evie, you want to kick us off?
Let's talk about risk. Yeah. So, for the first question, how do you look at risk today as an asset class?
Yeah, that's I think a good and very deep topic, I feel. And so maybe a quick background here. The fund that I run, Overlook Ventures, and the thesis there is basically to invest in the infrastructure of risk across AI, autonomy, and regulated markets. And so what I'm looking for there are companies that are basically tapped in like two categories. One, you know, describe it as like the frontier risk, like everything that is new, right? Think about AI safety, AI security, autonomy, robotics, and how that kind of affects our everyday life and how, risk evolves in those kind of sectors. And then on the other hand, I think about and talk about structured risk, which is like traditional cyber and security, traditional insurance and kind of market infrastructure and how that is evolving, right? And so uh, I had a chance recently to also give opening remarks at one of the largest AI conferences here in San Francisco. And the way I went about it is that I believe that uh, everything we have today as society and every advancement we kind of made as humanity goes back to our ability to manage risk, right? And so I believe that risk is somehow one of the most misunderstood asset classes in the world because most people still think about risk defensively rather than economically, right? But when you
Right.
zoom out, entire industries already are existing around pricing, transfer, and monetization of risk. Insurance and reinsurance, I think, is probably one of the most well known out there. But derivatives, structured credit, catastrophic bonds, markets in general, credit default swaps, like all of these like traditional financial instruments are fundamentally mechanism for packaging uncertainty and transferring some sort of a capital willing to absorb it, right? But when you go deeper there, again, going back to my initial assessment or description, you know, um, everything, and I love that you had Rick on from Hippo. I think he's the one I kind of stole it from. Is that everything you see around you kind of touches risk one way or the other, right?
Yep.
The chair you're sitting on, the food you're getting, all of those went to kind of a chain that at the end of the day touches, risk at one point or the other. And so I think what is changing now when we think about the asset class of risk is that technology is dramatically expanding and changing, right? Um, what we can measure, model, and how we can transfer risk has dramatically shifted within the last, I would say, decade plus. right, with everything that is coming. And now we're going through another very huge wave of AI, which is again enabling how we look at risk, how we manage risk, and how risk is actually expanding in general, right? Historically, many risks were simply uninsurable because data was not available. Monitoring was impossible. Pricing was maybe too uncertain, going back to the former two, and verification was just way too expensive. But it's changing very quickly, right? I mean, AI is one of it. We had I think when you think about IoT efforts over the last 5 to 10 years have changed a lot as well. Real-time telemetry, now embedded finance, embedded insurance, connected infrastructure, autonomous systems. All of these things are changing the way we live and the way we operate. So that was like a longer answer to your question.
Yeah, it was a good answer, man. It was a good answer. And I can corroborate on the idea of the things I did in the early days at Hippo around IoT strategy that were meant around resilience in a home and
Yeah,
protecting them.
you guys were
They're
very
now
yeah. Very,
now driving other products in the market that have nothing to do with the house, right? Like it could be around power consumption or power outages or utility usage or a number of different things. So, Amir, you mentioned a few different markets, right, that you focus on. I guess when you think about the mispricing of risk today, right, where do you think is kind of the heaviest spot where you see mispricing of risk? Is it insurance? Is it in the derivative market? Where do you see the mispricing that's occurring in today's economy?
um, I think, I mean, we can talk about insurance. I think it's probably the easiest to talk about in terms of mispricing, right? And I think, there I would probably talk a lot about, AI driven operational risk, right? How that's kind of, I mean, not only mispriced, but probably not even priced into anything right now,
Yeah.
right? Most people think about AI as a productivity tool, but that's like we're kind of rapidly moving away from like AI recommends something to AI acting on something, right? And so how does that work? That's fundamentally shifting everything because when we think about liability frameworks today, they're mostly around how a human operates, how a human acts, and what happens if something goes wrong, right? But once the AI systems start approving transactions, adjusting pricing, handling claims, moving capital, triggering workflows, and so on and so forth, that profile changes, from informational risk to operational risk, right? And operational risk historically is where the largest losses have emerged because failures interact directly with real world systems, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that, and I'm seeing a lot of like obviously new companies now emerging that want to price AI or underwrite AI and kind of play in that field, which I still believe we are very early on to do because there's so many unknowns we still don't know, right? I mean, it's kind of an interesting time we live in because these models are evolving like on the not only daily basis, I would say probably hourly basis, right? And when you interact with them, it's quite interesting. And I've been spending a lot of time with them with those models myself, either building, operating with it. On the one hand, they're like super smart and they do like amazing things, but then like 5 minutes later, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like it makes no sense. Like, or you talk about something specifically when it comes down to coding, like, hey, do X, Y, and Z, and then it does it, and it should memorize like what you told him to, but then forgets about it 2 minutes later. So it's kind of this dilemma we're living in right now, I feel, where things are actually either super smart, and you think like, wow, what did just happen? And then 5 minutes later, a day later, is like, what happened? Like, why are we going back to square one? And so I think that's where, I think still, risk is mispriced or not even priced in general, right? Um, I think another one that is related to this is I think model dependency risk, right? Um, I think that's one probably nobody really talks about at all. I haven't heard anybody talking about model dependency. Entire startups, large enterprises, are building businesses on top of like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, maybe a mix of them. But being dependent on one is kind of risk, right? Because if something happens, and as I just mentioned too, if one of them makes a mistake, if one of them forgets something, whatever it might be, uh, that's another, I think, huge risk that has not been priced yet in the traditional sense of way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Amir, I think to that point, right? I mean, we've seen this with Google, Amazon, GitHub. I feel like all the major brands have had more outages in the last 12 months because of AI issues than they've had in the last 5 years because of human issues, like total downtime, right? And
Yeah.
how do you price that, right? If you're a company offering a parametric to cover a data center going down, and the data center goes down because the model was wrong or the AI did something or interjected something that causes an outage, right? How do you price that? I think you're absolutely correct, man. I don't think anybody's modeled that yet. I don't think it's priced
No.
anywhere.
And
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about capital markets, how they price risk and how underwriters price it, I think that there's huge gap. Like it's a huge gap. Like, capital markets and underwriting markets fundamentally operate different time horizons and incentives, right? Capital markets are forward looking, underwriters are backward looking. And I think that's where we are in an interesting time, which I think we can compare to like the cyber wave 10, 12 years ago, right? It was a very nascent market. Cyber was just kind of emerging in terms of an insurance product maybe, or how do we price it and how do we underwrite it? How do we look at that cyber risk? And now it's become kind of a stable product, I would say. And I think in the AI world, we're similarly at a very early time right now because we don't have historical data. We don't really know, how that's going to evolve. But I think the difference here too with AI, at least from my perspective, is that AI is changing on a daily basis, which is somehow true also with the cyber or security aspect too. But given that AI, we're dealing also with agentic AI, with large language models, there's somehow black boxes on the back end, right? There's so many things that, again, we don't know, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
And yet, AI risk is effect on all the kind of risk. It's not only about IT or OT risk like cyber. It's professional indemnity. It's property, business interruption. It's the all deal.
yeah, I mean, business interruption, I think, is a good one because, as you mentioned, Mike, I mean, there has been incidents where AI kind of, shut down complete systems
Yep.
or, deleted whole databases. Like, and I don't think that's part of any, business interruption policy, right? As of today, going back to like, how these policies were written were basically based on humans, right? And human failure or human mistakes and also our whole law or legal system is around it as well, right? I think a great example here is obviously autonomous vehicles, as they are kind of emerging more and more right now. When we were looking, or when I was looking like in autonomous systems, that was literally like a decade ago. We'll try to understand of like where is autonomy going and how can you price that risk, right, of autonomy. And it was like very early beginnings of Waymo, obviously no data there. So simulation software became like a very big topic that I looked into, and how can you simulate outcomes and basically learn from those outcomes. What are some edge cases, right?
Yep.
But even to date, we still have a kind of like unknown situation, because I think that's the most dangerous one, is that we're living in an era where we still have people driving and we have autonomous vehicles on the street as well, right? And how do you solve that kind of intersection? Because if you ask, let's say Waymo or Tesla, they're like, yeah, we're like, our systems are great. The problem
Yep.
is, on the other side. And so all of these things we're still trying to figure out though, and I'm excited for the future. I think that there is a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, it's great.
What you said about earlier that the human create the wording, the policy. What do you think about the risk, the silent AI risk? Because where exposure exists but are not explicitly defined or covered. And this, just in the last years, reinsurance identified that there is a silent cyber and not
Yes.
at the beginning. Right now, they understand, okay, silent AI is going to be the first thing that we are going to attack. What do you think about those kind of risks?
I mean, we're already seeing it. We talked about it, right? In underwriting, compliance, hiring, fraud detection. What we haven't really clearly defined accountability, li liability, monitoring standards, and like operational boundaries. I mean, these are all like the topics that I'm actually excited about of when I think about companies and startups, right? And so, as you mentioned, it's similar to, the cyber wave, right? Before cyber became a standalone category, companies already had cyber exposure embedded inside, general liability, professional liability, D&O, E&O, without even explicitly understanding what that really means, right? And I think AI is probably following a similar path, but it's going to be more complicated, I feel, in cyber, because again, there's so many unknown. And so here too, the difference too, I think we have to make as well is that cyber didn't touch any decision making, right? AI really touches decision making.
Yeah.
And so when you think about regulated markets specifically, and I mention it all the time, is that, banking, insurance, healthcare, biotech maybe too, whatever, autonomy, some of these markets they can't be a maybe, right? In healthcare they can be like, oh, maybe it's true because someone's gonna maybe die. In banking, and maybe will transfer $10 million instead of $1 million, right? So the decision making point here with AI is, I think, a huge part that we haven't figured out yet, and it's quite, you know, it's exciting, but also frightening at the same time, because again, we don't know. And then once AI starts participating in decisions, which is already happening in recommendations and actions, liability becomes blurry as of today, right?
Yeah.
Causality is becoming harder, attribution becomes super hard, right? And governance becomes critical. And so I don't know if you guys have followed this too, but and it was part of one of the newsletters that I put out. I think it was Colorado that has a new law that any enterprise who adopts some kind of AI application or AI agent or whatever you want to call it, and that AI application, does something wrong, goes rogue, or makes a wrong decision,
Okay.
you know, it's actually the CEO and the board who are responsible for those actions, right? And I think that's just a start because we have to start somewhere, right? Till we know where we're going. And I believe like many enterprises have material AI exposure, but without even knowing what it means and realizing it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amir. I talk about this all the time at conferences related to insurance, right? You have no case law either around,
No.
right? And insurance, especially when I'm talking to a lot of the AI claims companies that talk about all the decision making they do. And I always ask the question of like, well, what do you do when the AI needs to be on the stand and deposed as part of a claim process? How did the decision work? And like the looks in the eyes of like, because that's what actually happens in insurance. Like I've been on the stand a number of times as an underwriter defending a decision I've made that's caused harm to somebody's life based on a policy not paying a premium that was agreed to or a coverage, right? That's the piece that to me is a very big silent risk around AI exposure and
Yeah.
where does that fall, right? And then I think it leads to the next question that I'd love your perspective on is like who holds that risk, right? Like Colorado is a great example. I love the thought, and not as a CEO, and that kind of scares me of, what my founder's doing behind the scenes is going to fall on me from an AI perspective. But, curious your thoughts on that, man. Of like, where do you see it, stopping?
Yeah,
Is it in the technology org, within the business org? Is it, where does it land?
I think we don't know, but it's kind of distributed across the stack. I mean, I go back to autonomy, and there was another topic we were dabbling about, 10 years ago, is that when we are in a world where nobody's driving, and we have autonomous vehicles, what happens if, an autonomous vehicle hits a pedestrian, hits another, autonomous car, someone within that car, has injuries. And so who's responsible? And, there the stack went from like, the OEM to the tier two, tier three, to the software layer, to the underlying architecture. And I'm still not sure where we are in that process, to be honest. But I believe, we're here in a similar kind of situation where we have, the developers that develop the software, the architecture, safety controls, the enterprise deploying it, obviously, becomes another one to bring into that equation. But I think at the end of the day, going back to the Colorado case, it's happening already, right? It's like, hey, the enterprise is, at the end responsible today. And then the infrastructure and platform are probably part of that too. But one thing that I'm still like, trying to think through, and I always kind of hit a wall, is that most of these models are so smart, or are supposed to be so smart, that they always are learning, right? So it's always a continued learning. So even when you think about safety mechanisms, safety controls, training methods, model behavior, like it's just such a influx system that I'm not sure how we're going to solve that, right?
Yeah.
How do you make sure, even if you say, okay, let's say model A, we looked at the safety controls, we looked at the limitations, we looked at the training methods, and this is how we're going to, price that risk or underwrite that risk. But if it's learning on a daily basis, like how does that evolve, right? And I hope it learns to be a better system. But then we also have, the doomsday people on the other hand that are saying that, AI is, if we aim for super intelligence, we're basically becoming obsolete, right? That's another, thing to think about.
Yeah. That's an interesting, one that I think we could probably have a whole separate call about.
I mean, that's the stuff that I think about a lot, and I hit a wall too. And it's I mean, at the end of the day, when you think about it, where we were 5 years, 10 years ago to today, it's just insane, right? I mean, I am an engineer, and when I think about my first line of code I wrote like 20 years ago, I don't even know when that was, and how cumbersome that was, to today when I can just like prompt engineer everything, right? You obviously have to know what the prompt is and how you do it the right way, and what the outcome is, what you can build. It's just insane, right? So the question becomes, do you need like super intelligence, or do we have it already, right? Are we pushing for the last 1 or 2% to really build something that simulates or emulates a human, and human, thought process, human thinking, and everything that comes with that? And if we do that, can we do it in a safe and secure way?
Yep.
And how does it look like? And I always mention that too. I believe, we will end up in a world which looks similar to the movie I, Robot. I
Hmm.
don't know if you know that movie.
Yes.
Um, and so the question becomes, and there is already like doomsday movies out there, right? The question becomes, if those systems become smarter than us, what is our role in society, right? Because at the end of the day, when you look at the world, as far as we know today, okay, because that's another discussion, we are the smartest species out there, right? So, uh, but if we have this AI who's smarter than us, what is our role in this, right?
Yeah. 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 That's a incredible point, right? Because as a lifelong career underwriter, I always think about AI from a compliance end, thinking about this purely from an insurance perspective, needs to think like a human, right? Like at the end of the day, for it to actually be able to do the job of an underwriter, because as an underwriter, it's always document, 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 because if you make a mistake, it was documented the logic. And I was at a conference probably about a month and a half ago in New York with RDC, and they had somebody from Google X who was there. And he was like, look, he's like, we have the underlying decision that took place underneath it. There's just no human way for us to display the billions of parameters that went into that response that happened in that instant. It's there, it exists. It's just how do you visualize that to a point that a human can comprehend how that decision was made, right? You can't. So it's an interesting problem to think about, and it's also scary to think about. There's a lot of bad that humans do, and AI could do some bad things if it thought like a lot of the wrong humans that are in this world or have been in this world over time.
Yeah,
So yeah, it is it's
yeah,
a problem.
yeah. I mean, it goes back to human conscious, right? It's actually a very interesting point that you mentioned is that there's people who do bad things, and it's pretty easy, or like quite quote unquote easy to kind of nail that down and be like, okay, you making this up right now. You took the car and ran into somebody. You made that conscious decision, right? And then you can break this down of like, okay, were you under influence? Were you, I don't know, high? Were you under drugs? And then break this down even further. Or literally, did you fall asleep? Whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, the first was like your conscious decision as a human of like driving into whatever it was, right? And then
Yep.
going back to what you said, like the billion parameters that we have, how do you analyze that?
Yeah.
It's the same question for the humans. Like, how do you analyze why did the human did this?
Yep.
If you go down that road, it's going to be impossible because you cannot get into the brain of someone, right?
Yep.
But and that's exactly, I think, something that is exciting but also frightening.
Yeah. That's unreal, man. Yeah. It is. I struggle with this every day because it is an incredible tool and it's so valuable and we use it every day and it's saved the company money, many dollar bills in many different ways and has allowed us to do things to help our customers. But I can totally, understand it from a compliance and a legal end. There's a lot of risk profiles that we still got to think about with what that can entail. You know.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think when you look at, let's say, the last 20 years of how society and humanity evolved with technology, right? From the start of the internet and how that enabled us to do things that we're doing today, either connect with each other or doing things better, right? To the mobile wave that, we all have in our hands here, right? Which is something, again, I feel like that's a blessing and a curse, but it's a different topic. To cloud and then blockchain and then now like the AI wave that we have, and all of those have enabled us to be better. And I hope this looks similar than the other waves too, which is already pointing in the right direction, as you mentioned. Like you can do things better. You're faster. There's this meme out there, basically people are like, I thought AI is helping to do less work. I'm actually more busy than before.
Right.
And I think that's quite interesting to look at because those who want to be better and do more can actually do 10 times more, right? And so, and um, there will always be people who will abuse the system, right? Which we have seen over the last waves too, right? They'll use the system and technology to exploit others or whatever. But I think now with AI, it just becomes ubiquitous, meaning I think you and I, if we want to, can use that too also to do harm, right? Which was not so easy doable, I feel like, with the waves before.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very, very true. Very, very true.
I mean, before our last question, I would love to hear your investor's angle about the risk. Okay, especially you see a lot of startups, you see a lot of technology that wants to the fundraising, etc. What is the risk you think they understand the least today, especially from a VC angle? Okay, what the VCs at least understand, and also from a startup perspective, what they are still don't get when they are trying to build something into insurance.
Let me talk about this maybe a little bit more holistically. So I think when you look at the investment landscape today, and I've been saying this for the past 2 years, the only thing that is moat today is distribution, right?
Is that solution?
It is distribution, distribution. Um, because again, we talked about it. Technology has become ubiquitous, and anyone who is willing to learn or already is strong technological in a technological way can build something pretty quickly. I mean, I built my own internal platform within the last couple of weeks, right? And that would have been not possible without the tools that we have today. And so building things is not really a moat anymore. I think for founders out there, the question becomes for me, and that's what I look for, is that what unique insights do you have in the problem that you're trying to solve? And I feel like with that unique insight comes also the unique distribution mode that you bring to the table, right? And it could be as easy as like, I'll give you an example for a couple of companies that I invested in, right? There's a company that is, and I'm not going to name it, it's still in stealth. They're developing basically, I call it AI governance infrastructure, helping enterprises bring demo level AI agents to production ready AI agents, right? And the underlying frameworks that comes with them, and how can you train those models to kind of self heal and self learn from each other, right? And when you look at the background of the founders, I mean, they spent years understanding AI models like researchers in that space. They have unique insights that I think none of us here on this call have, right? When it comes down to that, and the other co-founder comes with a deep experience on the cyber and security side, right? And so those are things that will give you a moat to build also something sustainable. And with that, I think comes also a distribution angle because you understand from your unique experiences what the buyer will look for or what they're looking for because you kind of experience the problem, right? And so that's, I think, what matters today. I think on the insurance side, we see now away from when you look at from 10 years ago, and Mike, you were at Hippo, you guys were early. We went from everybody chasing tech-enabled MGAs and products to now everybody's chasing, software and AI products for insurance, right? And I'm not sure if we're running into the same wall there. I think there's pockets within insurance where software and AI makes a lot of sense and plays a huge role. And one is obviously claims. I believe that's like, the perfect spot for AI and software to help. Um, but I see a lot of companies going into like a very niche problem in insurance that they're trying to solve. Believe it or not, I still see people trying to chase after traditional auto and home, where I'm like, I don't know if AI is literally the problem there.
We get
Uh,
asked about starting an HO3 program every day, every day. That's
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And then you see still, people want to build like the AI enabled insurance carrier. And let me tell you this, I think that makes sense and that there is a place and a way for that. The question just becomes, how long will it take to get there? Because as you know, Mike, being on that side, and I had actually, I was hosting a large delegation from one of the largest asset managers in Europe here, right? And they asked me, they're like, hey, if you were our CEO, what would you do? I'm like, listen, guys, you guys have all the data. Like, you
Yes.
guys have all the moat. Like, what are you waiting for? Right? It's like, you guys can make anything you want in terms of like implementing this AI technology. The biggest problem is that many or all of these companies don't have the data mode, and getting the data, you can get it, but it takes just a longer time to get it, right?
Yeah.
And so building like a whole tech forward AI forward insurance carrier, fair enough, but question goes back, how long will it take to get there?
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Just yesterday, we heard about Corgi that they raised their round B after
Yes,
a
I
few months.
saw that too. I still
100
don't know. I still don't know what they're doing, just to be very frank.
same.
So
Same.
I
Yeah,
don't know, but wish the best of luck.
Yeah, we're back in that world, man. I think you said it the best, Amir. It's interesting the shift of that old kind of MGA play and now the AI SaaS play. And I say this coming from the company that I've founded, which I would say is a blend of those two worlds, right? Because that's where the opportunity is. There were things that came out of the first insurtech revolution that worked, right? I think we see a whole new distribution channel and a whole new distribution angle that we've never seen before in the independent agent world, and the technology that's enabled products to get in front of customers. But at the end of the day, we still sell complex risk programs, and the world is evolving more rapidly than insurance is, and the customers are the ones who end up losing coverage and having gaps. And how do we figure those things out? AI is going to be, and this is a piece, if we had more time, I would love to follow up on with you at some point. But a lot of things that people fail to focus on now is that the consumer has as much access to AI as these companies and carriers do. And they are
100%.
using it to their advantage to understand what's missing. How am I working with this company? What is this company providing? Where do I go to find stuff from somebody else? That's going to be a big impact on the industry and how people assess their insurance programs going forward as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's been a lot of fun, man. Evie, I don't know if you have anything else you want to end on, but I feel like
Let's
we
let's
followed.
yeah, let's finish with something a bit fun. Fun fact that most people don't know about you, Amir.
Oh, fun fact. Some people know actually about it. I have a dog that is 5 pounds, and I love him. And people laugh at me because I'm a 220 pound, 6 foot tall guy that walks a 5 pound dog. So that's probably a fun fact. People, it's always funny because I look at people on the street. They're like looking at me like, "What is this guy doing? Like this dog?" And but I love him.
That's great. Amir, I will say, and this is not a fun fact, but a fact that I enjoy about you, man, and I won't share details on it, but your backstory, man, and where you came from and where you are today
Oh,
and how
thank
you
you.
got here and everything else, man, is one that should inspire a lot of folks to double down and get off your butt and get out and just go build something and try to have an impact, man. So,
And
very, very much
That,
appreciate you taking the time to meet with
and
Evie and
also
us.
his name is like
it's actually
with
true. It's a fun fact too.
yeah.
A lot of people don't know that, but if you Google my name, I will not show up. Someone else will show up. And here's another fun fact, because when I met my wife and she, Google, she told me that she's like, I Googled your name and then I couldn't find you, and this a person showed up, and I was like, this guy is a scam.
That's great.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great. Good stuff,
Amir,
man.
thank you
it's
very much.
yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me. That was fun, and yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Hope to see
Awesome.
you.
Yeah, hope to see you guys soon.
You too,
Yeah,
brother. Thanks,
Thank
man.
you. Thank
thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.